Okay, for my 3-act structure assignment, my tentative thematic idea was to go with your instincts and only trust people that you would trust with your life. And this is shown throughout the movie because Steve generally has very good instincts about situations that he's put in. And the scene that defines the normal world is running on the mall, which it shows how the normal world in this movie is basically the modern world, except the X-Men and Captain America exists, and this scene is to remind us of their abilities and how more advanced they are than the modern world in this movie. And this relates to my theme because you can tell off the bat Steve feels a connection to the guy that he keeps on running past, which plays a part later in the movie because the guy comes back to help him in certain situations about an hour further into the movie. And important events in this are he runs past them, and then he runs past him again, and then eventually, once he runs past him a couple more times, he finally stops and they meet up to have a conversation. And an important line of dialogue is on your left, and you just ran 13 miles in like 30 minutes because these lines of dialogue show how Steve is a lot more advanced than everybody else. And it just puts it into perspective what the normal world is for Steve being um, a lot more able than other people. And it also shows his fame when the guy is introducing himself and he says Steve Rogers, and the other guy says I figured that, because it shows how Steve is also a sub celebrity because he's a hero. And the inciting incident is when Fury is attacked, and it shows that there is now an enemy and a problem, which signals the end of Act 1. And another problem is when the Captain America tries to catch the shooter, and he is cast out of the normal world because he is used to being better than everyone, but the shield is all of a sudden caught by a seemingly equal strong enemy. And this scene relates to my theme because Fury tells Steve not to trust anyone, which makes him at points even question his own trust in Fury, but ultimately he puts his instincts behind him, and he is right with it because he trusts Fury, and in the end, Fury was correct and had a plan the entire time. Important events are Fury is allegedly killed, which puts a vex on Captain America, which throws him out of the main world and symbols the end of Act 1, and the shield is caught by the elusive enemy that that Captain America is thrown out of the world by because he's not used to there being someone who's stronger than him. And important quotes are don't trust anyone, which Fury tells Steve basically to only trust his instincts. And Steve says, when asked about the shooter by Natasha, he was fast, strong, and had a metal arm, which this is important because uh, he hesitates a little bit with this because he's still trying to comprehend the fact that there's might be someone as strong as him out there trying to go for the other side on the bad guy's side. And the midpoint that creates a false sense of resting is when Captain America is with Natasha for about 20 minutes of the movie, and he seems very comfortable when he is with Natasha despite them being on the run, and he is way more relaxed when he's talking to her, and this shows how they still have qualities of real people despite their very unrealistic lives and their unique abilities. And this relates to my theme because Steve has trust issues because of what he's been through and his duties and what he's supposed to do for a job, but he can still recognize a genuine, trustworthy person who is on his side, which is Natasha. Despite her not necessarily being his friend, he knows for a fact that he can trust her to be his ally. And the important events from this scene is the car ride home because it shows how they're actual people and they talk, and they aren't just only about their mission and all that. They actually communicate, and it shows the small bond that they have between each other and how they can actually trust each other. And then the kiss is also important because it shows that they have it might be to hide, but it also shows that they have a connection that Steve feels he can trust her, and this is represented by this, despite it being just to hide. And important quote is, "Was that your first kiss since 1947?" Which shows how Natasha is one of the few people that is able to actually joke around with Steve and show that he's like a normal person and has regular social abilities, and he's not just a superhero that's good for doing the mission and doing it correctly, and that's about it. He's also a regular person. And the crisis is when Jasper Sitwell goes on a spiel about how Hydra is going to be used to scratch off all of the threats against them, and Steve can't let this happen, and so he is starts his plot to stop Hydra, and then he is attacked again on the highway by the Winter Soldier, who turns out to be his friend Bucky, who was also cryolated like him and saved for the future. And it shows that he's eventually going to have to face Bucky, which will put a emotional vex on Captain America. And this helps with this connects to my theme because Steve seems to want to talk to Bucky when he figures out it is him, but quickly realizes that Bucky cannot be talked to because he seems to have his memory wiped. And despite his want to try to talk to Bucky, he backs down and flees because his instincts tell him it's not safe. And the important events in this are the Sitwell speech and the fight with the Winter Soldier, because the fight with the Winter Soldier presents the problem that eventually Steve is going to have to face the fact that he's fighting against his own friend. And the Sitwell speech showed the ultimate plan of Hydra and the diabolical plan that Steve is going to have to stop, which is the main issue in the entire movie. And the important lines are, "Bucky, who the hell is Bucky?" which happens when Steve calls Bucky by his name and he's unrecognizable to the name. And then the other important quote is, "Then the inside helicarrier scratch off the list of a few million people at a time," which shows that um, the main plan for Hydra is to scratch off a few million people at a time with their helicarrier, which is something that Steve can't sit around and let happen. So it shows Steve's main goal and helps lay out the climax, which is to stop Hydra. And the climax is the greatest tension because it is the battle that decides whether or not Steve and Natasha are going to stop Hydra, and Steve confronts Bucky for the last time. This scene relates to my theme because Pierce, this guy, has bad instincts, and it seems and these may help Natasha get the upper hand and stop him from commencing his plan. And Steve fights Bucky to almost death and then falls after giving up because he doesn't want to fight his friend when the ship explodes. After Bucky fishes him out of the water, um, this shows that Steve's trust in Bucky, despite him beating him on his face, his instincts were still correct about him, because in the end, after beating him up, he still fished him out of the water. And important events are Steve fights Bucky but gives up and survives because Bucky pulls him out of the water. And Natasha gets the upper hand against Hydra and prevents the launch and saves all the people. And important lines are, "Sorry, did I step on your moment?" when Natasha finally reveals that she's been in disguise the whole time as a ally of Pierce, and she gets the upper hand on him and prevents the launch. And then another important line is when Steve is being beat by Bucky and he says, "I'm with you till the end." And then Bucky almost seems to stop punching him and the ship explodes, but in the end, even though Bucky was supposed to kill Steve, he still fishes Steve out of the water, which shows that Steve has good instincts. And then the end is, it provides a sense of resolution to some degree because it hints at the next Captain America movie's plot because Captain America says he's going after Bucky to figure out who he is, and that's around the time where it ends. It also shows Natasha's resolution because it says that she's going to be looking for an unblown cover for at the end of the movie, which shows that that none of them, that even after all of the entire movie, Steve's instincts from the beginning to trust Natasha and Nick were all exactly the correct instincts that he needed, and Steve's instincts are to go find Bucky and figure out what happened to him, which is what his instincts are telling him to do. And most important events were Natasha walking up at the end to say goodbye and say what she's doing, so it provides a sense of closure for her character. And then Steve says what he's doing, so it provides a sense of closure and a lead into the next movie. And important quotes are, "I lost all my covers and I need to find a new one." And Steve says that'll take a while. And Natasha says, "I'm counting on it." So it shows what she's going to be doing for the majority of her time. And another important quote is, "You're going after him, aren't you?" And it said, and then he says, "You don't have to come with me," because Steve is saying that he's about to go on a mission to find Bucky and figure out exactly what happened to him. And I said instincts about 300 times over that screencast. I hope this one actually recorded correctly. It did. Okay, thank you for listening. I never know what to say at the end of these, but